let's see. Well, so far, nothing much has happened today that I know that I'm aware of. Mike, have you heard anything that officially has happened?
No signings. The last one was late last night. Who was it? Sean Horkoff in Anaheim was the last one I heard.
And Justin Williams went about 9 o'clock, I think.
Right. And that was it.
I'm just putting this up.
But that one was a little surprising in the sense that it was Washington. I mean, in retrospect, there's a team that has had trouble getting out or winning a Game 7, and you got a guy who all he does is score winning goals and key goals in Game 7. So if you think that way, it's a good combo.
That's a good point. I'm just almost here. I mean, and I think that it's obviously a situation where Barry Trotz has dealt with him. Having played against him so many times.
Yeah, but
it's a great fit for him because he's closer to his beach house, which is in Ventnor, which if you guys weren't seeing the pre-show, but I was talking about how the various shores and in New Jersey have different kind of areas of the city. In Philadelphia that move to the different beaches, which is 75 miles away, but they are very specific to. It's very funny. You go to South Philly, and there's certain sections of South Philly near the Geno's and Pat Steaks, which is the big cheesesteak place in Philly, right? There are certain areas near there that are that definitely move to Ventnor, which is where Justin Williams has his place. I'm in Margate, which actually Margate has Lucy the Elephant, and also the Greenhouse Restaurant, which is literally 2 blocks away from me, which is right next to Lucy the Elephant, got ranked in Time Magazine as one of the top 5 most beautiful women beaches in the world.
Okay, I'm heading there. Well, let's just say this: when you come to Buffalo next late June for the draft, I will take you to the Erie Marina where you can see the luxurious 100-foot beach, because there is an area where they've taken away all the driftwood and everything, and there's an area of sand that's about 100 feet wide. That's the only beach in Buffalo. Although further down the lake there are some nice ones. Patrick Kane owns some property. I think it's Angola or one of the areas in the South Towns, but not a lot of beaches in Buffalo. Hey, Ty.
But a lot.
Hey, what's going on?
Ty, you are early. I hate to tell you this, but it is not Tie Day. It is Thursday.
I know. We did.
I know. This is my body is all out of whack. I think it's Friday.
Ty's description yesterday of the most uncomfortable thing we've ever seen, Kevin, had me laughing all night long. The most uncomfortable thing, you guys didn't witness it. I won't show it again. Don't worry. But right after Connor McDavid was drafted, there was a moment where the NHL Network, for some unknown reason, put Connor McDavid, who is a tall young man, with Daryl
Cates.
Daryl Cates. Sorry, I always want to say Cats because I have a friend Daryl Katz growing up. Daryl Cates, and put them face to face with each other in a quiet, silent, deathly silent room, like a recording studio room, where Daryl Cates welcomed him in a scene from The Bachelor, like the movie, the series The Bachelor. And at any moment it was Ty's like, "Come on, guys, just kiss already." I mean, it was that awkward, and I tweeted out, this is oddly romantic. It was very strange.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was awesome, Ty. You made my day.
Happy to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything the NHL does at the draft or the award show is always the most cringe-worthy sort of happening. They always get these musical acts that nobody's heard from in at least 8 years, and it's the strangest thing. I don't understand it.
Oh, you're so true. It's so true. And then this year, I didn't see one lick of the award ceremony this year. I must say, I didn't watch 1 second of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, aha!
Right. Take on.
What I was thinking the other day, I was thinking about calling Ty either Sid or Stammer, because it occurred to me the other day that he said he started when he was 18. That means he's what are you now? 22 or 23? What are you?
I'm 23 now.
So you're a 5-year veteran.
Yeah.
In the league.
Yeah.
Which is like Stamkos and Crosby. They started when they were 18. What it all means is, if you were, I've covered the NHL 30 years, but if you could do that by age 48, that's phenomenal.
By age 48,
You're the Chris Chelios of the hockey world.
No, but the record is 50 years.
You have a chance to break that record, Ty.
You could do that. Red Fisher covered the beat 50 years.
You do. You have a chance to break that record.
I guess I'm Roy Hobbs because I came up in my 40s.
I think from now on I should refer to myself as 2 ties old.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm exactly twice as old as Ty.
Well, I gotta win something before I'm 30, or I'm gonna get labeled a choker. It's gonna be awesome.
I know. You're gonna be over the hill. You're gonna burn out quickly. You're gonna go win a couple Stanley Cups someplace and then get caught at the. Never mind. We're gonna go moving on. All right. So before we're boring Kevin there, obviously.
I'm just a little tired.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I don't know whether you know, but yesterday was the opening day of free agent hunting season. So.
I know, and we got me a couple on the wall over there, getting them stuffed. All right, so let's start the show. It is what today's day? I'm just kidding. I'm not that bad.
Just call it the second day of the free agent signing.
Day 2. Hello, Hockey World. It is Thursday, July 2nd, otherwise known as Boxing Day in Canada. No, I'm just kidding. 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Ty Anderson.
I never know who I am after he gives those opening things. But I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
And I am Eklund in my office again. I'll be back in the studio next week. Tomorrow's show will be from the beach, so because the family's going down, kids are off tomorrow. But and then tomorrow, I'll be back in the studio in my studio next week. Today, I'm still in my office because there's so much going on. I've got all kinds of computers in here, all kinds of different screens. If I could only turn this camera around, you would be amazed. That Kevin asked the other day how many computers I have. We had this conversation on the phone.
Talk about an awkward conversation.
It was an awkward conversation, and I said, unfortunately, because I have 3 kids and my wife, and I'm going to use them as an excuse, but that's not probably legitimate. I probably have more computers than I own pairs of underwear. I realize this, which is probably, and I have at least 15 pairs of underwear. So there you go. Let's move on.
Talk about uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's what I said yesterday.
Today's show is brought to you by Take a Boost. Okay, I got my jug here. Take a Boost when you're when future sterility really isn't a big deal anymore. Drink Take a Boost.
And that knock on the door is the Pennsylvania State Police.
Right. When 5 coffees gets you only 2 morose, drink Take a Boost. This is it's absolutely, and soon will be available in a 3rd county in New Jersey. They ship worldwide though. Actually, takaboost.com. So you can see right there. Take a Boost. We ship worldwide.
And we just lost Kevin.
Lost Kevin because of that.
Kevin doesn't like to take a boost. He's not going to do it.
No, Take a Boost is, if you look up top here, it's Ben Fonse's drink since 1913.
And Ben Fonse died in 1914.
Right. After running around the block 500 times. Because that's literally what you want to do after you drink this. So I put it in this lovely jar today, my Starbucks nug, and I am flying. That is delicious stuff. So thank you. Take a Boost. Thanks for sponsoring today's show. Take a Boost. Not just for horrible stomach viruses anymore. Okay.
Just don't cross any borders with it.
Right. Yeah. All right. No. Okay. That's just uncalled for, Mike.
Sorry.
Who would make a joke like that? All right. Also, my son has decided that the show should be brought to you by. Do you remember? Anybody here a fan of Ultraman, the original, the very original Ultraman? If anybody, you remember this, Kevin? You remember Ultraman, don't you, on TV?
Actually, I don't. I do not remember Ultraman. I'm sorry.
One of the first superhero series out of Japan. It was dubbed here. It's available now on Amazon. It's it was amazing. It was like literally the cheesiest thing you can watch. Search it on YouTube sometime. You'll have a blast because Ultraman's like a guy in a suit, like this, and he's got a helmet. He can shoot lasers when he goes like this, and he's fighting giant monsters who's also a guy in a suit, and they're walking along like what was basically like a scale train set, like below them to make it look like they're humongous, and it's literally that bad, the effects. But a couple of my son collects the Ultraman figurines. Here's one of them, one of the aliens.
Hey, it looks like just like Don Sweeney.
Right, and this would be Phil Kessel. So here we go. So
Jeez.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
All right, so let's get enough of that. Let's move on to the thing at hand. A quick review, Kevin, since we didn't have you on our show, which we had over 10,000 people watching live yesterday. That was crazy for us. That was pretty impressive. If only it was sponsored by somebody real, it would be more impressive. But since we didn't have you, Kevin, yesterday during the show, what are your reflections on the events?
Well, obviously, I thought the Pittsburgh Penguins were a big winner. That they were able to land the grand prize, which was Phil Kessel, and I thought Jim Rutherford's comments, where he said basically, look, after Ovechkin and Stamkos, you're talking that Phil Kessel's the top goal scorer in the league, and statistically, that's right. 217 goals over 7 seasons. One of those seasons was a 48-game lockout shortened season, and he still averages 31 goals per year. Had, by all accounts, a miserable season. Everybody was disinterested. The team was demoralized, and still had 25 goals. There are guys who can work as hard as they possibly could and can't get 25 goals. So that was a big win. And then the second story I felt was for the first time in a long time, I thought that the general managers around the league exercised restraint. Mm-hmm. And I'll just give you some examples. Bolesky in previous years would have been a $5 million a year forward. He was the best scorer out there. He only had one 22-goal season and only averaged, I think, 13 or 14 goals before, and yet ended up with a contract that seemed pretty reasonable at under $4 million, 3.7 as I recall, or 3.75, even a guy like Antoine Vermette, when no centers were available, got a 2-year deal from Arizona. There's a couple of guys that are still out there. I heard Cody Franzen expectations were much too high for a guy that the Nashville Predators were extremely disappointed with after they acquired him. Then we have to go back before the signing period, but I think the financial restraint started with the Boston Bruins, who said, we can't deal with the amount of money that Lucic is going to want, and we can't deal with the amount of money that Dougie Hamilton is asking for, so we're going to move him. And the Blackhawks said, Brandon Saad, we love you, but we don't love you worth that much money, so they moved you. So they moved him. And so I think it's going to be interesting now. Was this a reflection of the mediocre talent pool that was available in this free agent season, or is this a legitimate effort to try to move away from the idea that we're just going to spend for spending's sake on free agent day?
That's a real. I mean, these are so many good points there. My initial thought here is it took a decade, a little bit more than a decade, for this system to actually get to this point that we thought it would get to right away. Like, I remember when the whole thing, we were worried about it right away, that this is the way it would be, that there wouldn't be anybody to sign, or there would be players to sign and no one would have any cap space, and it would be crazy. And suddenly we got there after, one missed season, one half a missed season, tons of parity has overrun the land, and it's the perfect time to screw it all up with a couple expansion teams. I mean, and it'll change it all. So, but yeah, Kevin, great points. Ty, thoughts?
I mean, he's right. You talk about the interview period and how that sort of changes everything, I think, for a lot of these teams. With the interview period, you can do your homework now. You can see what a player is looking for. You can get a ballpark estimate. Then you can go back. You can run the numbers, talk to your scouts, do all the homework you need to do. Yep. Whereas before this happened, July 1st would come, and it was just a mad dash. It was like Black Friday when the stores open. Everyone's just running and trying to grab whatever they can, even if they don't need it that badly. Yeah. So I think that's how free agency used to be. It used to be a true frenzy, and now there's more organization to it in terms of what teams want, what they expect, and what they're willing to spend. I think the Bruins, they talked about this yesterday. Don Sweeney mentioned how he's able to be proactive with his approach with the interview process. That window allows him to figure out what's out there, what their backup plans are, and what they can really do moving forward. And that's been so invaluable to so many of these teams. And I think, too, you're seeing teams learn from the mistakes of the Buffalo Sabres and the Toronto Maple Leafs when, Billy Lano's contract is out of this world crazy after one great season. David Clarkson gets paid way too much money. And it becomes really hard for these teams to return to sort of normalcy after that. They're a punchline for a lot of people. Moving these guys has been impossible without eating money or taking on a bad contract, taking on an injured player. So I think with the cap being what it is and as important as it is, GMs are starting to wise up and realize that they cannot spend as recklessly as they did 2 or 3 years ago.
Well, both of you make excellent points, but the thing is, I think that the quality of the free agent class had something to do with it. I mean, Bolesky was the one guy who a lot of teams were interested in as a forward, and he got under $4 million as an AAV. The top 3 defensemen, Sekera made 5.5. Green made 6 on a shorter-term deal that I'm sure he would like to get. Franzen is still signed, so I think that was a contributing factor. Also, a lot of teams are spending their money on their own players, so I think that they're not as willing to go out in free agency when they see the results that Ty mentioned, like Clarkson, like Ville Lano. When they see the results aren't there for some of the players that they bring in, they're not willing to spend willy-nilly to get these players. Now, Kevin, I mean, I agree with the assessment of your assessment of the Kessel deal in the sense that Pittsburgh got what they needed. They needed a trigger man for either Crosby or Malkin. Kessel can do that. Kessel will thrive in Pittsburgh because the attention will not be on him. He can blend into the woodwork and just do what he does best, score goals. But to me, this was a big win for Toronto because they will now do the rebuild. This was the first step of the rebuild. If they didn't move Kessel, then the rebuild was a bunch of talk and nothing. It's funny that it all is sort of dependent on the fact that that Chicago made the deal with Columbus rather than with Pittsburgh, because supposedly Pittsburgh was in on Brandon Saad, who's a Pittsburgh native. If they would have gotten Saad, then they probably wouldn't have been in on Kessel. But because he went to Columbus, Rutherford had to circle back to Toronto and make the deal. Now, the critics of the deal are saying Toronto didn't get Olimata or didn't get Pouliot. From what I heard, Rutherford wasn't willing to trade Pouliot because of their situations on defense. But they got Kapanen, who's 18 years old, a good offensive prospect. They got a decent defensive prospect in Harrington. They got a couple draft picks, and they got rid of Kessel's $8 million cap hit. It gives the Leafs flexibility, and I would not doubt that they're going to move a couple more of these core players, and they will be bad the next couple years. But this is the road that the team has to go on for Brendan Shanahan to remake this team and make them put them on a positive path. And they needed to do this, and they did it.
Yeah. Now here we are, second day now. And still a lot of guys. I mean, still an interesting group out there, and still some weird talk going on. Some of the first surprising names, Joel Ward. I'm still surprised he hasn't signed yet, unless I've missed it because I've been racing around.
He's still out there.
And Joe Ward brings a lot to the table. I mean, if I'm the Capitals and bringing in Justin Williams, I would have just brought in Joel Ward. But maybe it's a different situation price-wise. I guess maybe that's not the comparison, but. I don't know. I like Justin Williams a lot, but I like Joel Ward a lot more. So he's still out there. And then, of course, Kevin, the most common email I'm getting, I'm sure you're getting, is why are my Blues trying to trade Kevin Shattenkirk and TJ Oshie, right? I mean, this is the thing. Why are they doing it?
Yeah,
you have to take that.
I don't know the answer to that, and it's a question that I've heard as well. And I just haven't had anybody, even the teams that have been in negotiations for trying to get Shattenkirk, don't know why the Blues are trading him. But I guess the only logical reason I can come up with is when you look at the percentage that the Blues are paying for defense versus what they're paying for forwards. I think if they're not the top, they're very close to the top in terms of the amount of money they're committed to defense. I mean, they've got Boomeister, they've got Pietrangelo. They're paying a lot of money on defense, and they just need to get that back, in more of a, better split in terms of percentage. But, Shattenkirk is not without his warts. Like, he's a top pairing defenseman, and he's a terrific puck mover and a transition guy, but, he's not a shutdown defenseman like Ryan McDonough or Ryan Suter. He's not.
For sure.
Yeah. So, and I don't think they went out saying, well, we got to move this guy. I think they thought, well, we might be able to get a lot for him, and they probably would. I mean, they were trying to get Dylan Larkin out of the Detroit Red Wings.
Wow.
Part of the deal. So, I think maybe that's how they view it. I don't know that they were said they had to trade him, but they could get a lot for him.
I think they're looking 2 years down the road, Kevin, when you see that. I mean, Shattenkirk is making over $4 million right now, and Pietrangelo is making $6.5. Bouwmeester's making $5.5. And the way that the price of defensemen are, as a UFA, he's a guy who could make $7 million as a free agent defenseman. He's that good, and he'll be, I believe, in his mid-20s at that point. So, that's probably what they're seeing. They maybe see 2 years down the road that they can't sign him for that kind of price point, and maybe they can get a couple good young prospects who will fit into their scheme now. I think I wouldn't move Shattenkirk because I think they have a window right now in a couple years that they could contend and win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Mike, and that is what Ty brought up yesterday. It was a great point. I think this is paralysis by analysis. I mean, I really do. I think that they lost to the Hawks again. This year they didn't lose to the Hawks, but they lost out to the Hawks eventually, right? They are a very good team, and in the East would probably be the favorite to go through to the Stanley Cup final, but can't. In the West they've got so many teams, but I think what you brought up yesterday, Ty, which I really liked, was the whole fact that there's a bit of a hiccup in the Chicago Blackhawks right now. And why trade Shattenkirk? Shattenkirk, and you have 2 more years of Shattenkirk contract. Let this go through this. Keep Oshie even, and maybe you catch the Hawks in a down year. Remember last time they won a Stanley Cup, they traded a bunch of players, and the following year they struggled a little bit, and then they got back. So, Ty, your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, I look towards that. I think this strip down of the Hawks, and I don't know if I want to call it that per se, but losing Brandon Saad is going to be absolutely huge for the Chicago Blackhawks and the rest of that Central Division that now has a bit of an extra step on them. You look at the Vancouver Canucks, right? Vancouver Canucks would never get past the Chicago Blackhawks. The Blackhawks are in cap hell in 2011, and Vancouver gets by them in a 7-game series. I don't want to liken the Canucks to the Blues, but there are some similarities in terms of that was one of the teams that was always in their way and always prevented them from getting to that.
That was the team that was winning President's Trophies back then, that Vancouver's team. You're right. Just like St. Louis has been challenging for that.
And exactly. And I just think that if you're a team that has never won a Stanley Cup, like the St. Louis Blues, and you're progressing, you feel like you're getting closer and closer. This has been a process for about 7 years now, really. I don't know if you can bail on this at this point in time. I just think that you have to really make sure that if you do move a Shattenkirk or an Oshie, the return is on par or better, because it's just you're sending a bad message to your fans, and it's almost like taking 2 steps back again. And this would be a year, I think, for St. Louis to really make a run here, given Chicago's inconsistencies. Having questions about Nashville and whether they can repeat what they did last year. Right. I mean, this Central Division could be St. Louis's for the taking, and I think they have to be, cognizant of that.
Kevin?
I agree with what Ty is saying. Like, I think the window's still open. I still think they're a competitive team, but let's not mistake Shattenkirk for Bobby Orr or even Erik Karlsson. He's a really good offensive-minded defenseman, but I think Pietrangelo is a better all-around defenseman. And they have a really good defense. I think all they were really trying to do was trying to improve their team now. Like, I think they wanted Dylan Larkin, but I think they still, I didn't see this as an indication that they were trying to prepare for the future. I just think they felt like, well, maybe we can get something and we can get a little more oomph up front as well. So, but I do agree with what Ty said about there is an opportunity here, and I think it's a greater one than people anticipated. I don't think if they would have given up, for example, Patrick Sharp and Bickle as their only 2 losses, I think they could have overcome that. But Brandon Saad, that's a tough, a tough loss. Like, they don't have many guys that have bite in their game.
And that's what, Kevin, why I'm a little skeptical. I know the talk is still out there, and it may come to fruition that they move Sharp. But I mean, Saad was a top 6 forward, and the rumors were he was be asking for over $6 million. Sharp's making 5.9 the next 2 years. At least there's cost certainty there. You know how much he's making. He's a top 6 guy, and if they trade him, that's 2 top 6 guys that they lose out. Do they think that Teravainen can step into a top 6 role? Do they think there are other players that they've brought in that can move up into the lineup? I mean, that's the question that Stan Bowman really has to ask himself.
Well, but Patrick Sharp played third line.
Yeah.
He is a top 6 forward, there's no doubt. But on Chicago, he almost was surplus. So I think I still think they're going to end up trading him, to be honest. But they do believe, in fact, I was on the conference call with a few journalists talking with Stan Bowman, and he did say that Teravainen was penciled in, essentially, for October. He didn't call it a top 6, but that's what he was, implying. And they felt like he had proven himself in the postseason, and, he'll be 6 months older, and by the time he gets...
A couple little breaking things. I'm sorry, Kevin, to interrupt you. First of all, Marty St. Louis has just announced his retirement.
Wow.
That out at the age of 40. And also, the Canucks have announced that they have fired their assistant GM, Lawrence Gilman, their assistant GM, Lauren Henning,
and their director of player personnel, Eric Crawford.
Crawford.
Wow.
So they've cleaned out all the underlings that were leftovers from Gillis, and I'm sure Benning is probably going to bring in some people that that he knows for his underlings.
Wow, that's something.
Yeah, that's something on both of them. I mean, Gelman has been around the block a long time. Is with the Coyotes, pretty well respected around the league as a guy that knows the salary cap, and there was no lack of performance on his part. It's just pretty clear Benning just wants to be surrounded by the guys that he knows and likes. Not that he doesn't like Gelman, but
Jim Benning's press conference yesterday was among the stranger. And I don't know if any of you saw it or not, but it just. I know he's kind of an awkward character, and I'm not saying he's a nice guy. He's a perfectly nice guy, but he's a little bit awkward in media anyway. But this was really a stranger because the Canucks fans were angry yesterday, really, really angry. And yeah, didn't you think Benning's? I don't know if you guys saw Benning's press conference yesterday, but it was. I'm not surprised that maybe that they were taking heat, and perhaps he had to do this. I mean, it was the Canucks really did not help themselves at all. In very much even in the draft, people were telling me so. And this is the team that made the playoffs last year, really probably because of a great coaching job. Most people assumed, and most people assumed that their window was closing, and yet they still snuck in. Did you see the press conference, Kev?
I didn't, but I know the sentiment that you just expressed is what I've heard from my readers as well. I mean, there was sort of a drumbeat about that Benning seemed overly obsessed about getting draft picks back, and second and third round picks, like that was the objective, as opposed to kind of staying where you are and trying to improve the team.
Yeah, I mean, they moved out Bieksa for a second-round pick. The only deal that they made of consequence was swapping a younger Zach Cassian for an older Brandon Prust. They both have 1 year left in their contract, and those are sort of imperfect third-line guys as it is. So I mean, I don't think that's a deal of major consequence, Ty. But I mean, yeah, to that point. And Vancouver has got an older core, and they made the playoffs last year with Desjardins as their coach, and I think exceeded expectations because a lot of people thought they weren't going to make the playoffs. But you've got the Sedins in their 30s, you've got Alex Burrows who's starting to show his wear and tear. Dan Hamhuis is not getting any younger, and Ryan Miller is their number one goalie now. So I don't see this going up. I see it going down for the Canucks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, then you add Prust, and their other big signing was Matt Barkowski, who can be a middle pairing defenseman with time. But yeah, I mean, this Riding Verbata's not necessarily that young either. So I mean, this is an old team. This is an old man's team right now, and I think Benning's sort of at a crossroads there where he wants to get draft picks, but you don't want to sell low on guys at the same time. And I think that's I don't think they got the return they expected for the Eddie Lack trade. I thought they thought they were going to get more than what they ended up settling for. But I mean, this team is truly at a crossroads, and I mean, Benning probably wants to get his own guys in there at this point and just sort of take it from there. Benning obviously has a connection here with Boston, so
yeah,
he's definitely he's a vocal type. He's a bit headstrong in terms of size and skill and sort of that physicality versus skill. So that could be an issue there for Vancouver moving forward, especially with this core. I mean, the Sedins are going to be there until they retire. But everybody else, I mean, who knows what's next? Because I was very surprised personally that they moved out Kazian, just given Benning's mindset and typically what he looks for in a player.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And it felt like he didn't want to move him. I mean, the way I was looking for the press conference to see if I could show you guys, but the way I don't know, it kind of this whole thing sort of reminds me of the Chiarelli situation in Boston to a degree before, where it feels like Benning is either uncomfortable about something. I mean, it always is something to me when they don't fire the GM, but they fire the assistants, or they don't fire the coach and the head coach and they fire the assistants. That always feels like.
I mean, I think it's a case of him wanting to own, the direction of the franchise. I mean, I'm sure that Benning and Trevor Linden are in lockstep about where this team needs to go. But if you look at them, like I was saying before, the core group of this team is in their early to mid 30s. The Sedins are, I think, 34 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
And you can't trade them, because if you have to trade one, you have to trade both, and they're making $7 million a year. So talk about immovable objects. It's the Sedins. And you really don't have this young group. I mean, they have a guy like Bonino, who they added in the deal for Kessler last year, who's in his 20s. But the young group of guys like Bo Horvat, I mean, he's just starting to come in. Jake Virtanen was their first-round pick last year. He's probably coming, but he's probably a year or two away. So I mean, there is a wide gulf with the Canucks between the main players who are probably starting on going down the slope of their career, and the young guys who are just starting their career. There's nothing in between. They've traded all the guys that are sort of in between, with the exception of guys like Edler and maybe one or two others.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm going to get.
Okay, we lost you there for a second. Everything froze up. Okay, I think. Okay, he'll probably come back in a second. But he probably log off and come back. Kevin,
Okay, I'll log off and come back.
Actually, no, you're good. You're good.
I'm good now. Okay.
You're good now. You're back.
All right, so I'm going to play a little of Benning's press conference yesterday, just for a second. You guys can see this.
I'm going to have to check out. I got to go write a story. But
Okay.
So, are we doing it tomorrow?
Yeah, we'll do it tomorrow, Kev. Thank you so much.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Yeah, I kind of figured Kevin would have to write the Marty St. Louis story.
Yeah.
Stupid mainstream newspapers. Anyway, here's Benning's press conference. Let me show you this here. This is really interesting.
While you're queuing that up, how does Tampa Bay look now with that deal for Marty St. Louis? They got a year and a month and a playoffs, and they got Callahan. I think the Yzerman, in retrospect, made a phenomenal deal because, I mean, if St. Louis would have played another year and been effective, maybe it balances things out a bit, but
maybe. I mean,
no,
maybe.
Yzerman made a great move at that point, getting what he did for St. Louis.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to bring this up here. Let me see how I can control this. It's always fun to control. All right, here we go. All right, let's see here. I'm going to turn up here volume wise. So here we go. Okay, so should be coming up any second. Any minute now. Come on. Play. Here we go.
We're going to get a commercial. We're going to get a commercial here.
This content is currently unavailable.
Jeez.
It's not available. We're not in Canada. That's the
Oh,
problem.
that's right. Oh man. All right, I'll figure it. I'll find another spot. But let's move on to let's move on to Tyler Bozak for a second. Mike here, and I'll find another version of this. This content is currently unavailable. It's a very sweet voice that woman has. All right, so sorry, just saying. Bozak. Now Bozak, I've heard today. I've heard Arizona have been mentioned. That's nothing new. Obviously, it's been mentioned by everybody under the sun. I think over the last couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
I also heard Carolina though. Carolina's in a spot where they really have to. They have to do something soon. What are your thoughts? What do you think Bozak brings to a team, Mike? I mean, what's the selling point here? What's the pitch?
Well, I mean, okay, I think he's a very good special teams guy. He can kill penalties. He is a good playmaker, so he can help on the power play. He's good in shootouts, which is a little bit diminished with the 3-on-3, but he's a quick player. I know there's been some criticism of him in terms of his defensive play, but I think that's more ancillary to the fact that he played on Phil Kessel's line, and that line was dependent on by the Leafs to be a completely all-out offensive line, and their defense suffered. I think he's an adequate number 2 and a really good number 3. And if you look at the situation with, say, Carolina, you've got Eric Stahl, who I'm assuming right now they're going to re-sign on a long-term deal because he wasn't traded. And you have a young guy in Elias Lindholm who's an up-and-coming guy, but I don't think they want to give him so much ice time that he's going to be a number 2. He would sort of fit in between there, and his salary is not out of whack. It's $4.2 million for 3 years. So I think that Carolina would make a bit of sense. Just a question of what is coming back the other way if it's Carolina. If it's Arizona, they have enough prospects, that probably one of those prospects would be coming back in a Bozak deal. I heard some people say that this morning that the Antoine Vermette signing in Arizona might limit the chances of a Bozak deal there because Vermette would just be returning to center. But it's a question of whether they want some of their young kids playing in a second-line center role, if Dylan Strom's going to make the team as an 18-year-old, or if he's going to go back to Erie. So, I mean, there's a number of factors here. I think he's an attractive enough commodity that the Leafs can move him, that they wouldn't have to eat any salary, that they could get a good prospect back. I don't think they're going to break the bank with him, but I think this just is another step in the rebuild. And if you look at what the Leafs lineup is right now, I looked at it last night with the additions that they made in free agency and with Kessel being moved out. To me, they're a bottom 5 club right now. And any more veterans they move out, the worse they get, which is, I think, the goal this year is to be bad for a couple years, get your high draft picks, get your salary cap structure in order, and then move forward.
Sure, and that definitely is. I think that, remember he came out when he came out of college, he was pretty highly sought, taught. There were people who wanted him. There were a lot of teams who wanted him out of college, and he just never quite lived up to it.
Yeah, but he's been an effective NHL player. I mean, in general, I think he's a success story. He came out as an undrafted free agent out of the University of Denver, and he has scored 20 goals, and he has had over 30 assists on one occasion. I think he's a success story. He's just what is the problem is he was pigeonholed into being the number 1 center in Toronto, and he's not a number 1 center, but he's an effective number 2 or even a great number 3.
Right.
And you have to look at this too. I think if you look at the past 3 seasons, Bozak's production has been on par with a player like Brad Richards. Of course, Richards had a lesser role in many of those cities in many of the stops that he was in on the way. But if you're a team that struck out on Richards, although Bozak's a bit pricier, I mean that could be your backup plan through the trade. And I don't think it's going to cost you too much really in terms of a trade market, because at this point, it was floated out there the Leafs wanted a second-round pick at the draft. They didn't get it, obviously, for Bozak. So the price will not be that astronomically high. It's just a matter of do you want to do it or not if you struck out on Richards.
They wanted a second-round pick in a really deep draft where second-round picks were the quality of first-round picks in other drafts. Now that we're a year away from the 2016 draft, I think what they probably want is a prospect in an organization. It could depend on whether it's a prospect in Carolina like a Ryan Murphy, who's a first-round pick who has some flaws in his game, but has the ability to be an offensive defenseman with skating ability. Or if you go to Arizona and it's a guy like a Max Domi who is a first-round pick and well regarded, but there's still some lingering animosity there from the fact that Domi was sent back to London to the OHL last year when he thought he was ready to make the team, and it was mostly out of sort of budgetary constraints and not the fact that he was ready for the NHL, because he impressed in the preseason. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it could be one of these teams. It could be somebody else. I mean, Bozak is, I believe, 28 years old. He is in the prime of his career, and he's an effective player. He's been ripped a little bit in Toronto, but I think he's a get for a good team, and the Leafs should get something good in return.
Now, Dave Nonis also has moved on, or it looks like has moved on, right? They've granted permission for the Anaheim Ducks to talk to him.
Yeah, he was. He had established some contact with or there had been reports that he was going to go back to Anaheim. That Bob Murray was interested in bringing him back in as a senior advisor. The Leafs didn't want to grant them any permission because Nonis was privy to all their draft preparations, and obviously, if he goes to Anaheim, he could let them in on what was going on. It wouldn't be, but they weren't going to hold him back, and now he'll take a job with the Ducks as a senior advisor, and I'm assuming whatever he earns there will be subtracted from what he makes from Toronto. So he just moves on.
Let's talk a little Valesky, too, here, Ty. So they go out and get Matt Valesky, which you talked about as a good possibility yesterday during the show. Between Matt Valesky and Joel Ward, if I was the Bruins, maybe it's just more of a Bruins-type player. I would have looked at Joel Ward a little bit more. But still, Matt Valesky, he's got the upside. What's the feeling in Boston about this?
Well, I think when it comes to Valesky, he wanted to be a Bruin. That was the vibe that I got from Don Sweeney. With the Bruins, they feel as if they've been a bit stagnant in terms of their excitement around the team from the players. And Sweeney made it a point that he wanted to bring in guys that were excited to be Boston Bruins.
Right.
Before the signing even became official, Matt Valesky changed his Twitter picture to the old school Bruins logo, and his Twitter bio just read Boston Bruin. And that's like, that's
awesome.
He clearly wanted to be in Boston. He talked about how he really respected Cam Neely as one of his favorite players growing up, and I think the allure of being in Boston and in a hockey market, and this isn't to take a jab at Anaheim by any means, but clearly, just based on what he said, Valesky said yesterday, he wanted to be in a big-time hockey market where the fans would be there every night, packing the building, and I think that was a big thing for him. He mentioned that. He said, this was the first year that he played a game in Boston at the TD Garden, and he said he just loved the energy the building had. He loved the city, the original Six franchise, everything it means. So I think that was a huge factor for him in all of this, and I think that's reflective in his contract as well. He did get a big contract, 5 years, but $19 million in total. It's not bad for a player that many of us thought would net $5 million, $5.5 million even maybe on this market. So I think there was a Bruins discount, if you will, when it comes to this, and that's reflective in that contract.
I predicted 6. I thought it was going to get silly, and he did take less, and there was some restraint out there. What about the deal, Ty, that they made? I thought it was pretty intriguing. Flipping Riley Smith, who's making over $3.4 million the next couple of years, and they get back Jimmy Hayes, who's a Boston native, former Maple Leaf draft pick. They get him. He was at the end of his entry-level deal, and now he's an RFA, and I think probably they'll sign him to a bridge contract, probably for a lot less than what Riley Smith was making. And they flipped Mark Savard's contract and the cap hit to Florida. What were your thoughts on that one?
Well, Riley Smith, I've talked to you guys about this. I never thought that contract would really start here. I thought it was just a bad deal for a player that was underwhelming. Yeah. It just screamed trade chip to me, just based on you have a player with term and he's young. He struggled this year mightily, but I think with Riley Smith, he couldn't get it going with anybody, and he became a passenger on the Bergeron line with Brad Marchand. So I think the Bruins felt they had to sort of do damage control here and chip out a right winger with a left shot to get another righty into the fold, and that's what they get in Jimmy Hayes. Again, Jimmy Hayes thrilled to be a Bruin. Talked about it, nonstop yesterday. How this is his hometown team. He can't wait to play in front of his family and friends. He just moved back to Boston this past summer, so this is good timing for him. So I mean, this is going to be another fit for the Bruins. He's 6'6". He had 19 goals last year. This is a player that will go to the dirty areas. He will go to the corners. He'll go to the front of the net. He'll get rebounds. He'll get tip-ins. That's what the Bruins lacked last year, and they talked about this at length, really, is that they didn't feel they had enough guys that were driving hard to the net. With Jimmy Hayes, you're going to get that on every single shift. Yeah. And I think that was a huge thing for the Boston Bruins with this trade. And freeing up that Marc Savard money, if you factor in bonus overages from last year, which is just under $1 million, they have about $8.9 million to spend. That's to re-sign Hayes, Brett Connolly, and maybe add a top 4 defenseman, whether that's through the trade or free agent market, like Cody Franzen or Johnny Oduya. So the Bruins, moving Savard has put them in a great position here. It was good to hear that Savard is in a better place mentally. According to Sweeney, he talked about how his golf game is coming around, and he spent more time with his family. He's getting more involved in his passions, and that's great to hear from Marc Savard, who obviously will never play a game again. And this is good for him. I mean, this is a great trade for the Bruins all around. This has been a roller coaster for Don Sweeney. Yeah. I mean, every day it's high highs and low lows. It seems to be with Hamilton, the Lucic, the Ronaldo trade, to these moves yesterday. I just think it's been such an up and down roller coaster, and you're finally starting to see some of the plans that Don Sweeney clearly has for this team.
Well, I like Hayes. He's like you said, he's a big guy, but don't expect him to replace Milan Lucic. He's a big guy with good hands. He's an offensive player. He was a Leaf second round pick who they moved to Chicago. Then he moved to Florida. Now he's moved to Boston. So I think that's a good move. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I was a critic of what Sweeney was doing, but getting 2 first round picks for Milan Lucic, which is what ended up happening with the flipping of Martin Jones to San Jose. There is a little room for a little more optimism now, but I still think that defense needs a little work, and there are some options out there. I still think a guy like Christian Ehrhoff might be a short-term patch as a veteran guy, like a 1 or 2 year contract that would work there.
Yeah, I mean, that would make a lot of sense. I think it all comes back down to how they feel they can sort of manage that flexibility there. Because as of right now, Adam Quaid is a top 4 defenseman for the Boston Bruins, and I don't think they want that. I think they like him as a third pairing guy, a muscle guy. You can get guys out in front of the net, things like that. But if the season begins with Adam Quaid in the top 4, there is a massive problems with the Boston Bruins, I think. So, I mean, he's put them in a position here of strength. And between assets and cap space, maybe the Bruins do go into the season without adding a defenseman, but they look at the trade market by the deadline with that cap space, with the multiple first-round picks, with an increasingly better prospect pool. So, I mean, they have some options here, and this is the first time we can say this about the Bruins in what feels like forever.
Yeah.
It seems like they're always tight against the cap, and they can only sign a guy if he's league minimum or takes a massive, massive discount, or if a team eats almost the entire salary. And so this is refreshing in a weird way for the Bruins. They've never really been in a position like this in a very long time.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing about it was just that, and somebody talked about this the other day. I think it was before you were on the show. Before you were on the show yesterday, is that what was weird about this whole thing is now that we're here, what's happened in Boston is fine. It makes some sense. They decided to rebuild, and they're saying they're not rebuilding is a little bit weird. Some of the moves feel a little bit out of spite from what happened before, which there's certain things that are hanging around. But at the end of the day, it's not terrible. Like you said, they got some prospects. They've got some good things going on. They're still in a division and a conference where you can make the playoffs. But the weird thing at the end of the day is they just really didn't prepare their fans for this. I think that was like the weird thing and I think, did you get that sense at all, Ty?
Yeah, I just felt that this was a day where they were going to take care of some in-house stuff between Ryan Spooner and Jeremy Smith, and that was going to be it. And then you hear about everything goes quiet at 5 p.m. We're done with the show. 5 p.m. comes. I get on the teleconference. I'm on hold, and I get a beep in on my phone, and the caller ID is TD Garden. I'm like, oh, this is weird. I should answer this.
Right.
So I answer it, and they're like, oh, we're pushing it back. So they push the conference call back, and then sort of you're like, okay, the Bolesky front is kind of quiet right now. What's happening?
Right.
Then you start hearing, all right, his name is starting to heat up a bit. The Bruins push their conference back an hour. Bolesky's name is heating up. You can check the dots. You're like, oh no, here it comes. Here comes the bad move. Here comes the $6 million a year for 5 years.
Right.
And then as you get another call, they're pushing it back even further. You're like, okay, they're doing something here. There's more than one piece involved here. And then it sort of just happened all at once.
Yeah.
But this was a big move for the Bruins, I think, in terms of really capitalizing on what was a bad weekend. For a lot of fans with the loss of Lucic and Hamilton. The reasons, we'll never know every single reason. It sounds like Hamilton simply didn't want to be here. He has some issues with Claude Julien, which he wouldn't be the first player, of course. This was their way of rebounding in a big way, I think. You bring in the local kid, that's going to get some buzz. You bring in who many consider to be the top free agent goal scorer, in terms of on the wing in Bolesky. So this is revitalizing that sort of anger, but channeling it into a positive way for the Boston Bruins. And I think that's, again, Bruins fans through all of this just wanted to know what the plan was.
Right, that's where I think they made their biggest mistake.
Plan.
Yeah, I think that's where they made their biggest mistake. If they had said, listen, we're not going to get any better unless we take maybe a little bit of a step backwards, but we can do that. We have the capability to do that.
Yeah.
But they didn't say that, and of course you can't really talk about trading Dougie Hamilton, publicly. You can't say we're going to trade Dougie Hamilton or.
Yeah, but Ak, it was me that said that basically, the Leafs had prepared their fans for the rebuild, and we're going to make changes. There's got to be
some place in the middle between telling your fans that they're
but Boston made all these changes and didn't prepare their fan base. And the thing was that I think Don Sweeney did have a plan. I mean, Bob McKenzie reported a couple days ago that the plan was to trade a couple of those first-round picks and something else to try to move up into the top 5 and get Noah Hanifin, because then you would have had Hanifin, the Boston kid, replacing Dougie Hamilton, who clearly didn't want to be in Boston, but that didn't work. They couldn't find a partner to move up into the top 5 with those picks. So part of it didn't work, and now they have to sort of catch up. But the other moves that they've made, like I said, they look like they know what they're doing and they have a plan.
I heard they tried to take 2 of the 3 picks that they had in the first round. I talked to somebody late last night, and move to number 9, and then trade number 9 to Arizona, because Arizona was willing to trade that pick as long as they stayed in the top 9.
Right.
And so I think that was the goal. I think one of those picks they ended up with, or they didn't need all 3 of them. They felt like to get to number 9.
Right.
But
they couldn't.
That makes sense, as they acquired Jones.
Yeah.
In number 9. If they could have flipped number 9, if they could have flipped Jones for number 9, that would have made a lot of sense for the Boston Bruins.
That might be exactly what they were trying to do. That would make or Jones and one of their picks. Or something like that to number 9.
Well,
so
and don't make no mistake about this. Don Sweeney, he did let off some thinly veiled shots at Hamilton yesterday when he talked about players that want to be here. He said, we want guys that want to be Bruins. We want them that they're excited to put on the sweater. And he wants them to develop with the mindset they have a lot of pride, and they are ecstatic to be a Boston Bruin. They know the history of this team and what it means. And clearly, I think it doesn't take a genius to figure out that was a shot at Hamilton, who definitely, based on his contract he signed with Calgary versus his asking price to remain a Bruin, did not want to be here in Boston.
Yeah, because there was a big discrepancy there. Agreed.
Well, and like that, the whole Ryan O'Reilly situation in Colorado, the contract that he was asking for from Colorado, I will bet will have no resemblance to the contract that he signs in Buffalo. He was asking Colorado to pay him close to $8 million. I don't think he's going to make $8 million with Buffalo. It was a mechanism for these players to get themselves out of situations they did not like, whether it was O'Reilly and the fact that he was pinned down by the Colorado Avalanche salary structure, or Hamilton, who just wanted out of Boston. So,
right. A couple other things. Patrick Sharp. Still definitely on the trading block, and the plan is there's a little bit of a domino thing that I wrote about yesterday, which I'm still hearing is the idea. Minnesota was very quiet yesterday. They didn't do anything really, which is rare for them on UFA Day. They've had some big UFA days in the past, although they've also made some of their UFA signings on later on. If you remember, the whole Suter Parise thing happened on the 4th of July.
Right.
But the idea is that the Islanders would like to get Sharp or TJ Oshie, and if they can do that, they would then move Okposo to Minnesota. Minnesota wants Okposo, not Sharp or Oshie. So.
Well, I don't think Chicago is going to trade Sharp inside their own division.
Right, they're not going to trade Sharp inside their own division. I think it's going to be Sharp. I think Oshie could still be traded. I also heard, I've heard Oshie's name mentioned with every team, so I can't. But as I say this, I'm like, oh, here's another team I'm saying mentioned with Oshie, but I've heard of, at least half the league.
The team that's been eerily silent that needs scoring is Montreal.
Well, that's the team I was about to say. Yep, Montreal is the place that I heard Oshie to again, and it would be interesting. It wouldn't be the first time that Montreal reaches out for an American, in this situation. So that's kind of a cool twist. I've heard Joel Ward's name mentioned just in the last half hour here. I updated as you guys were talking too. Joel Ward possibly heading to the Rangers. I think that's a it does make sense in that the Rangers are a very, very unphysical team. There's really, for all the Rangers were all these years, they are absolutely, not what I'm used to the Rangers team being. They're a hard team to hate. The Rangers are, and that's a weird thing for the Rangers. Like the Rangers growing up, that was easy to hate the Rangers. They're a hard team to hate the Rangers because they really don't do anything.
Well, the question is how the Rangers fit them in. When we were talking yesterday with with all the RFAs that they have, how do they fit Joel Ward in?
Yeah, I have been told that Gordon wants to put a big stamp on this team, and that there will be some players that move out. Also told though that Keith Yandel won't be one of them. So, but there are players. I think Derek Stepan could be moved out. That's the name that keeps coming up, and he's got value for sure. So I've heard Joel Ward. Of course, I've heard Joel Ward to Montreal as well. So Montreal, you're right. I think Montreal's going to end up with somebody here today, whether it's Ward or Oshie, or.
You have to realize too. I think if you're a team that is looking at this market here, Joel Ward is really coming into his own as a goal scorer. These past 2 years, he's scored 43 goals, and I think that's crazy, really, because his first 2 years in Washington, he hardly hit the back of the net at all. That was a big concern for the Caps when they first signed him, was that they weren't utilizing him in the proper way. He was a third line, fourth line mucker, and he wasn't scoring. And now, he can be relied upon as that sort of, if your team is going through a lull, you bump up to that first or second line, you get some energy going. He can score some goals right at the front of the net, side of the net, rebounds. He's pretty strong. So I think that's a big get for any team. I think Montreal could really benefit from somebody like that. But I think Montreal they need more scoring. They cannot rely on Max Pacioretty to score 40 goals a year and to win every game 2-1. You can't do it. It's not a recipe for long-term success.
And what I think, Ty, is that they're looking around. Mark Bergevin's one of the sharpest GMs out there, and he's looking for bargains. He's not looking to sign a free agent. And I don't think there's a free agent out there that's going to really be earning a ton of money on a long-term deal now. He's either got something cooking in terms of a trade. Because I think they need help up the middle. I think Ack reported a few weeks ago about Mikko Koivu, and that Minnesota might want to move Mikko Koivu out, and that would fit with what Montreal would be looking for.
Yep.
But Ward would fit, and there's a couple other guys, but they need offense. You're exactly right.
I don't think that Montreal. This is just my opinion. I don't think Montreal will ever win anything in this league if their top three centers are Desharnais, Canucks, and Eller. I just don't think that's not a recipe for long-term success in this league. You have to build deep down the middle, and they just don't have it. So, I love Thomas Plekanec. I think he's a fantastic two-way center. Mm-hmm. I think he's really sneakily good, really. But Desharnais is not a top-line center. And I think Lars Eller, he's a good third line center, but I think they have to move Galchenyuk to the middle. He has that skill.
Yes,
he has that right. Sort of
that
makeup, but I don't know if they will.
That's the problem, because from everything that I've heard out there, they don't think he's capable of playing up the middle the way Therrien wants them to play. He's not defensively sound enough, and he hasn't shown yet that breakaway offensive ability.
And you're right. And this is a Therrien thing that, and, I've had my issues with Therrien before, but this is definitely a Therrien thing because he does not like skilled players. That just are skilled players. He wants them to have other. He really is big about defensive responsibility, as all coaches should be. But he's especially that way. But I agree, Ty, that I don't think Montreal's ever going to get any better until they make Galchenyuk a center. I think that's the one thing they have to. I mean, Plekanec, I believe they will. I've heard they're going to re-sign shortly. And he's a good center, but really, what is he really? He's like a legitimate number 2 center in the NHL, right? And Galchenyuk's the only guy that they have that could perhaps develop into a number 1 center. And
Eller's been on the trade block for over a year. There's been a lot of speculation about them moving him out because he doesn't score enough goals, and he's I think right now Desharnais or Plekanec would fit well in a 2-3 scenario if they could get themselves a 1 like a Mikko Koivu. But you cannot have as you said, Ty, Desharnais, Plekanec, and Eller as your 1, 2, 3 and expect to win consistently in the NHL.
It's not going to work.
And my question is, too, is at what point does Bergevin become a bit concerned about his coach? Mm-hmm. P.A. Parento comes out yesterday and says, it's going to be great to play for a coach that actually wants me.
Right.
And that's like the second he gets signed by a new team, he's bashing the coach in Montreal. I mean, and this isn't the first time you've heard about issues with Therrien and his players. And
oh, no, it isn't.
You have to really honestly wonder how long this is going to last. I know they're winning. They're making the second round of the playoffs, but at a certain point, you need the coach and the players to be on the same page, or you're going to continue to lose players year after year.
And there's a reason that Carey Price won the MVP and the Vezina. I mean, this is a team that, without Carey Price, they aren't winning.
Yeah, their puck possession is terrible. They don't have a lot of goal scoring. They overplay PK Subban. And
I agree that Bergevin is a great general manager. I think he makes great moves, and I don't think but he doesn't. He makes moves that Therrien then utilizes like 60% of the player that he gets. It feels like he doesn't completely utilize. And Bergevin keeps making great moves and getting better players. I thought, the last year
Well, he had guys like Torrey Mitchell and Flynn at the deadline and as role players, right. And they worked out for them. I mean, good moves.
Well, and I like the guy that got at Anaheim, which I can't think of now.
Smith-Pelly.
Yeah, but there's another player the only time Smith-Pelly was a factor for them last year.
Yeah, but you see, I know that you're a fan of Smith-Pelly. I think Smith-Pelly is a top 9 guy. He's a third-line guy. He's not.
Yeah, but no, I know that, and I agree that Smith-Pelly is not as Smith-Pelly is right now. He's got a lot to do. He's got a lot to learn. He's got to be in more shape. There's so many things that he does wrong.
Exactly.
But that's where a coach can come into play. The guy has the skills and he has the talent. And when he actually got ice time last year, which happened, towards the end of the season when some players were hurt, Smith-Pelly started to work. He was working well with Pacioretty. He was starting to work, and then of course that ended. When the players came back, which it's just very strange when he's forced to play these players that are skilled players. They eventually thrive, but they don't just jump off the board and thrive. So that's where coaching comes into play. And Smith-Pelly is a project, but I don't think Therrien's the coach for anybody who's a project. I mean, I think that Therrien's a coach for a team that's really well put together and established.
Well, I mean, the thing is, they got to the conference final with Price hurt. They got to the second round with no offense. So in 2 years in a row, they've overachieved. So it's not like Therrien, unless there's an internal situation going on in Montreal, like was going on with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, where the general manager and the coach were at each other's throats. I don't think that's the case. So,
no, it's not illegal to be a jerk,
No, but
it's just that's what he is.
It's just the strangest dynamic because you have the skilled players that tend to struggle, but a guy like Dale Weiss is like the jack of all trades for Michel Therrien. He just loves him, loves him to death. So it's very weird how this all works out. I mean, but if you plug a player like Patrick Sharp into that Montreal lineup, they become a bit more dangerous. I mean, there's no doubt about that. If you had a line, second or a third line that looked like, Sharp, Galchenyuk, and Smith-Pelly, that's not a bad secondary scoring option for any team.
But will Sharp go there? I mean, I don't know how much control he has over that.
I think it's more realistic that there's more of a chance of them trading Alex Galchenyuk than Alex Galchenyuk playing center for them.
No, I disagree there.
I'm not saying they're going to trade him. I'm just saying.
No, but I've talked to people, and they are trying to get him to center. I've talked to people there. That is the plan, and the plan is to move to center this year, and that is where they'll go. I mean, they've got a good defense. They could improve certain situations, but our echo is getting so terrible. We should just end the show anyway, because we are definitely at the end of our time here. But great job, Ty. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Kevin, wherever you are. And remember, we'll be back tomorrow, 1 o'clock, probably maybe 2, but somewhere in that area. We'll let you know for sure as soon as I can find out, and depending on traffic and stuff like that tomorrow. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We'll talk to you then.